Let's start from the most aggressive one, d4. White is fighting for the center, but with d4 they are sacrificing their e4 pawn. Here we can take knight e4 pawn directly, and we can take at first cd4, cd4, and then knight e4. And this one, the second one, is much better, because in many lines d4 pawn will hang too. So knight e4, white plays d5. And their idea, if we move this knight, knight e5, then they will take knight e5, and after bishop e5, rook e1 or queen e2, and we are having problems with our minor pieces. And after d5, if we move back with our knight, let's say knight b8, they are playing rook e1 and having some initiative because they have advantage in development. We have some problems with e7 pawn. If we go knight d6 back, bishop goes back to f1, and then after short castle, bishop g5 and some initiative. But after d5, we have much better move. We go knight d6 with tempo. On bishop on b5. Anyway, white was going to play rook e1, and then after rook e1 they was going to attack our knight with tempo. So knight d6, we are going back with our knight, and at the same time attacking the bishop on b5. Now if they take our knight, then we take knight b5. So what's happening? We are pawn up. Also we have two bishops after cd7 or after cb7. In both cases we will take the pawn. We have here two bishops, pawn up, and a big advantage. So after knight d6, d6 is a bad move. If bishop goes back somewhere, if bishop goes back to e2, this is not good for them, because after rook e1, bishop on e2 closes the rook on e1, and rook on e1 is very angry on this bishop on e2. If bishop goes back to d3, now we don't go knight b8 back, but we go knight b4 with tempo on bishop on d3, and if it takes this, then we will have pawn and also a two bishop advantage, so bishop d3 is also not good. If they go bishop a4, now we cannot attack with this knight on this bishop on a4, but here we have another great move, it's b5. Again, we are not going back with our knight on c6 and going b5. If opponent takes d6, very cool, we take ba4, queen a4, short castle. One of the great things of always being pawn up, it's you can always give pawn back. And as in this case, we had pawn up, we give pawn back, and after cd7, queen d7 or bishop d7, what's happened? The position opened while we have two bishop advantage. So here black is much better. And after b5, if bishop goes back, if bishop c2, now knight b4 with tempo on bishop on c2. If bishop goes back to b3, then knight a5 again. We didn't go knight b8 passively back, but we played knight a5 with tempo on opponent bishop on b3. After knight d6, if white plays knight c3, so their idea after knight b5 to take knight b5 and somewhere d6. After knight c3, we have here bishop c3, cool move. Bishop c3, we take the knight on c3, which was protecting the b5 bishop, and after bc3, knight b5, dc6, dc6, now we are two pawn up, and the compensation for white will not be enough. So after d5, knight d6, probably the best move for white is knight a3. Developing the knight on a3, not running somewhere with the bishop on b5, with the idea, if we take knight b5, knight b5. If we go back with this knight, then it's coming a d6 move. Now it's coming knight c7, and if we take e d6, then it will be knight d6 check, so we have some problems. And after knight b5, if we go knight e5, again a d6. Now knight c7 is coming, e d6, knight d6 is not good for us. We should go short castle, but here we are having problems. Opponents take knight e5, bishop e5, bishop g5, pinning here. We have lots of problems with bishop on c8 and developing the queenside pieces. That's the idea after knight e6 to go knight a3. And if we go here knight e5, then knight e5, bishop e5, rook e1 with tempo on our bishop on e5. And here we have very unpleasant choice to go bishop f6 or to go bishop on g7. Because if we go bishop f6, then white plays bishop h6, strong move, not allowing us to go short castle. And here our king on e8 staying in the center. And after knight f5, now it looks like, okay, we attacked the opponent bishop on h6, bishop should go back, and then we will go short castle. Here white simply plays queen d2, developing their queen, and after knight h6, queen h6, yeah, they are giving their bishops, so we have here the bishop pair, but bishop on c8 is not developed. We have lots of problems, we cannot go d6, bishop is here, and our king on e8 having problems, so white has decent compensation. So after knight d6, knight a3, that is also not good. Well, we have here a very strong answer. Again, instead of going knight back to b8 passively, here we play a6. Again, attacking opponent's bishop on b5. Now if white plays d6, then we take knight b5. We are pawn up with 2 bishop advantage with excellent position. If bishop goes back a4, then b5 move. This idea we have seen in the previous lines, and with bishop c2, knight b4, or bishop b3, knight a5. After a6, probably the best for white is to go bishop d3 back, with idea, if we go knight b4, they play knight c4. The thing here is, if we take here knight d3, they take knight d6 check at first, and after e d6, queen d3, we have some problems with our bishop on c8. And after knight c4, if we take knight c4, bishop c4, then here after d6 we are having problems with our b4 knight. It will be a3, and our knight on b4 is suddenly trapped. Instead of that, after bishop d3, we just go back knight a7. So we played a6 instead of going knight b8 back. Just played a6, and after bishop d3, knight a7 back. And here you will see that the knight on a7 is much better than on b8, because from b8 he would not have any perspectives. But from a7 you will see some knight is doing a great job from c8. Here white is pawn down, so they should play very fast. Probably the best try is bishop g5, short castle, rook e1, and immediately putting pressure on our e7 pawn. But we calmly play here rook e8. Now what to do for white? Our plan is simple. We want to go b5, bishop b7, we will attack the d5 pawn, then we will play knight c8. Knight c8 will be great protecting the e7 pawn, and he will come to b6 and not putting another pressure on d5 pawn. If white hurry here with queen e2 attacking our e7 pawn, we are fine, we can give it because we are pawn up. Fine, take our pawn, and after bishop e7 we have here a tactic. We just take queen e7, take, and our knight on d6 is doing a great job. He is protecting the e8 square, so no rook e8. But while the b2 pawn is hanging, we just take bishop b2, and opponent loses a material. After b5, if white goes rook a d1 first, so after bishop b2 their a1 rook is not hanging. We just play bishop b7, giving e7 pawn back, and queen a5. Now there is very unpleasant pin, and next move is coming knight a c8 on opponent bishop on e7. And after queen c2 we just go knight a c8 back. If opponent take bishop d7, oh, this is very cool, we still have a 2 bishop advantage. We gave pawn, and now instead of material advantage we have 2 bishop and a big positional advantage. And after knight a c8, if bishop g5, here we take rook e1, and bishop d5, again we are pawn up. e8 important square is protecting our knight on d6, everything is fine for us. After bishop g5, short castle, rook e1, rook e8. If white don't want to play queen e2 and try to take e7 pawn, as we have seen it's not giving them much, we just go b5, bishop b7, and knight c8. Idea is killing it. If it goes knight c4, now we just take knight c4, bishop c4, and our bishop on c8 has freedom. We just go d6. Next move is coming bishop g4. For example, if white plays queen e2, attacking our e7 pawn, cool, we give it bishop g4, because bishop e7, this is very toxic pawn. After queen d7, e7, bishop has big problems with this pin. Next one is coming bishop f3, knight c8, and even if the bishop was not trapped here, we would have a cool position. This is about d4. You have seen how important at first to take cd4, and then knight e4 in many lines, d4 or the d5 pawn, as they are having problems. After d5, remember knight d6 back, at first attacking the bishop on b5, and after knight a3, a6 with idea, bishop d3, knight a7, then short castle, b5, bishop b7, knight c8, and white's compensation for pawn is not enough.